Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight, we are going to have a great summer 2023 read. It is an absolutely wonderful, adventuresome book, and as we have spoken over the decade about spirit, energy, tapestry, the things that we weave in our lives, our many lives, our spirit life, and our lifetimes, and those we meet along the journey. This is exactly what this book encompasses, all of those aspects. How can you possibly get all of those aspects in one book for a summer read? It's called the Quilt Journeys Mystery Series, and the first book we'll be talking about today is The Wandering Quilt, and the co-author is Dawn Bennett-Alexander, who is with us today. Dawn, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Oh, the pleasure is truly all mine.
So glad to have you, Dawn, to talk about this book. You know, we've spoken on this show over a decade now about spirit and energy and how you could feel it and sense it, and we're so much more than just this human body. Don't you think your book, The Wandering Quilt, is a very gentle introduction into that?
You know, I hadn't really thought about it that way, Dr. Jeanette, but you are absolutely right. Absolutely right. And especially since it's a series, even though I didn't know the other books that would be written at the time that I wrote it, it brings it up and introduces just the concept of that and talks about, you know, how this could happen, spiritual, from the spiritual side of things, the kind of energy that we have. And I think for many people for whom that might be a very foreign concept, this is a gentle introduction to the possibilities.
It sure is. You know, I wrote on the front of the book, as I always do, being the medium myself, I wrote a gentle journey of recognizing the spirit world and the stories left behind. I think that's so vitally important. Just as you shared how you started to write this book, you just sat down and channeled the story. And as you and I had spoke before the show, perhaps maybe some of these snippets, these times, or perhaps these stories may have been something in your past, perhaps?
I am open to all possibilities, absolutely all possibilities. And it's interesting because I didn't set out to do it. I've written textbooks all of my professional life and had sort of ventured into fiction, but not actually publishing it yet, doing it with my daughter. But when this came along, it was whole cloth. The story just came out. It was like it really did write itself. And what I love about what you're saying is that because I am open to all of the possibilities, I had to be open to the fact of even letting myself write the book, you know, literally sitting down at the computer and go with what was coming out of my head. But to find that once it got out there, it found its way to you, and you saw it a totally different way. It was consistent with the book, but just a very different take on it, a take that I am absolutely open to, is just for me. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes to even think about it because it work and getting its work done, and I believe I'm an instrument of that. I just have always felt that way. But I also believe that we see through a glass darkly. I can think I know what this is about, and as it turns out, once there, it turns out that it's about something completely different. And it may have even stopped me if I had thought about it as that as I was doing it, because I would think, oh, there's no way in the world I could do that. That's just, that's not my realm. It's not what I do. And as it turns out, what I've learned over the years is that the universe gives it in ways that we can handle it. So you write the book, but one of the things I did in writing it was that I never attached any significance to how many, like making money or how many people bought it. I wanted the information to be out there. The fact that that information could end up being information that was not what I intended, but as it turns out, over the next 4 books that I did, or 3 books that I've done since then, it turned out to be a part of it. I have to pay attention to the fact that maybe this was what it was supposed to be the whole time. I think that's one of the lessons in the book, is being open to things that you had not thought were there, and as it turns out, they are.
You know, I think, Dawn, the really most important thing is that this year, 2023, as we really look back in reflection, it's about being open to everything around you. Get out of your head, get into your heart, open up, feel things around you. You're an energy being. You're not a human that has this little Rolodex in your head and you're just a robot going about doing all of the things that we all, believe that we were going to do, in the 50s and 60s when we grew up. This is how our life will play out. But now we're turning around and saying, oh, no, Jose, that's not what it's about. We need to learn, explore, and find something new.
Yes, because...
and I think it's so interesting.
I'm not sure how much what we're doing is working.
Right. And I think that the most important thing, too, is that I've always been open my whole life, and I could never have things of other people because I could always feel the energy instantly. I can distinctly remember my mother had gotten me this horsehair bed from my uncle. He lived in Philadelphia, and I think it was in the early 60s. And I was highly allergic to the thing, but she just said, oh, no, it's not true. But what was happening was I kept getting all of these dreams, and I was having hallucinations at night and crazy dreams. I was picking up the bed had been part of some ancient kind of military guys, somehow, some way, back in some story. In other words, the bed was carrying the message of things like Civil War and stuff like that. And it was like, oh, gosh, it just has to go away. And I distinctly remember, so many times having this over my lifetime. So just as you share, we don't want to give a story away from the Wandering Quilt, but the quilt held its own energy. It had a story. Every time someone touches it, your energy gets imparted into it. And we think that objects don't have an energy. Oh, that's just a book. That's a blanket. That's a couch. That's a bed, whatever. Yet, all of our energies become instilled in these items, right?
Absolutely. I'm telling you, I'm really in tears here. You are incredible. So much of what you said, I am now looking at. I'm a lawyer, and for 41 years, I have taught law. I have written legal textbooks. I have the best-selling employment law textbook, and that has been my focus. It was also, as it turns out, the focus of the series. But that really, when I think about what I said in that book, about what you just said, it is just incredible that you have put those pieces together that way. And they were like a quilt. A quilt is a metaphor for life for me. We pick up all these pieces, and we don't always know where they fit. And as it turns out, each one of them has a place, and it fits perfectly. But if you think back to what I said about the quilts and how energy is such an important piece of what it is that quilts carry, because when you are under my quilts, you are my brother. I just went to D.C. last week and saw my family, and my brother, I took him a quilt that I had done for him, and he said, I'm covered in love. And I said, what, I'm going to have quilt labels made with that. He knew. He said, every stitch. He said, I will feel your love from every stitch that you have put in here by hand for me. that is real. That is absolutely real. And when I talk about it in the quilt, and I've talked about it in every one of the books in the series, how important that is, because I believe, like you, that everything is about energy, and we don't just leave it. That bed that you were in, I don't doubt at all, was carrying exactly what you talked about. And I don't think people really connect with that in a way that makes it really real for them. You know, they treat objects as just objects, and it's like, no. But, you know, for me, and I think of myself as, you know, almost scientific in my approach to life, in the sense that, you know, if you can't prove it, then I'm sort of going to be skeptical. And there were just things that came up that made it so I could not do that with this, and energy was a really good one. And I didn't realize I had passed it on to my children until I've got 3 daughters, until one of them told me that she doesn't go into secondhand places for things, because she just does not want anyone else's energy other than whoever made it to be in it. And she passed that on to her kids. You know, you just really have to be so careful. And there have been times when, either because of what the object was or because of who gave it to me and the energy I felt from them, I did not take it. Or if I took it, I immediately gave it away to Goodwill or something, because I just was not feeling that energy. And I'm a person who doesn't really think about things like that. I just sort of, you know, I'm doing what is absolutely in front of me. But the truth is, just talking to you, it makes me realize all of this really is there in my head. I just have not focused on it. And maybe now is the time for me to do that. I'm open to doing that. It's not like I wrote these books and, you know, they have to be accepted exactly like I said that they, you know, in terms of what I had in my head. No, it was like I never felt, and I just can't tell you how important it is to talk to you. I never felt like me doing the books was the end. It was the beginning of something. And you and your reading of it has told me so much more about what that could be.
Really, Dawn, I see it as you have now come into the beginning of your soul awakening, your spiritual awakening. And when you think about that, it's now saying, okay, the world as which you knew it before worked, and now we're going to say there's so much more. And I think, you know, as we see that, everybody gets it a different way. You know, some people have a dark night of the soul where they really have a lot of struggles because they don't want to let go of that old ways, or they find that they have a lot of regrets and pains and shame or guilt, and they kind of have to walk through that forest, so to speak. However, when we start to open up about something else going on in our life, it's about surrender, awareness, being open, and saying, you know what? I'm just going to be present, listen, and follow, and allow yourself to be guided. And I think pretty much when you start to do that, the story of the Wandering Quilt is your character allowed herself to be guided. She had no idea where she was going, how to get there, what to do, what she would find. However, when you're on that path, every moment you have to take it in awe and say there's an exponential amount of ideas out there of which way this will go, how it will play out, or what we will see, but I'm going to allow the exponential and not go in with my ways or thoughts or my old stories. Once you go into that door, it's the old one slams shut behind you, and you can never enter it again. You will now, Dawn, no longer, just as your character, no longer see life with those old eyes. You won't be looking for validation or verification. Just like with medicine, evidence-based medicine, forget it. It doesn't exist anymore. Each person is an individual. Each energy is around everyone. Everything we walk and touch and feel becomes a rainbow. It becomes a light. Sometimes it becomes dark light, but we feel it, we see it, we sense it. So I think your character in the book, The Wandering Quilt, went on a journey through history and just said, bring it on. What happened? What was going on then? who touched this? What are their feelings and their emotions? So it's really about opening up to life as an emotional baggage of your heart, and that's when it starts to flow. Don't you think, perhaps?
Oh, my goodness. You, I cannot get over you. This is just the most incredible thing. You know, for probably from the time I was about 10 or 12, I have always felt my ancestors around me. I can't even tell people like how that happens. I can't tell you that I see them or that I hear them. It's just, they're just there with me. They're just a part of me. Right. And I feel like what they want is for me to tell their story. And it is a story of not only pain, because they actually were enslaved in North Carolina, but it is a story of triumph as well, and all sorts of other good things that I have never been afraid of. And I don't think of it in a negative way at all. It's not anything I'm afraid of. It's just it's just a part of me that I don't even have to think about. And I remember when I think about the kind of stories that I tell in the series, and I think back to your question of, were these things that could have been a part of other lives of yours? The answer is, with all those pieces coming together, I think absolutely. I don't think in terms of having other lives, but it doesn't surprise me that would be the case, that this is why I would be so passionate about wanting to get this out, because sort of what underlies all of this is you all are not looking at the whole picture. You don't see the reality. I'm going to tell you the reality of it. And it's like, I wasn't there. How would I know this? You know? But it's as if, maybe you were, and it might be why you understand things on a very different level than other people do. In fact, I was just talking moments ago to my daughter, and it's hard to live in the world when you've got one foot in one world and one foot in another. Kind of you understand things on a very different level, because it's not what everybody else is doing. And they will think, kind of look at you askance when you say some of the things that you do. And again, I think of myself as being, very objective, and, my legal training has taught me to be able to analyze things, but still I can't deny what's really there. I have really felt that presence of them. I have really felt like I needed to tell their stories, but never thought that this is the way that would happen. That just never occurred to me. And it never occurred to me that it could be my story I was telling.
Right.
That is what eventually that I was doing, that I was telling my stories of something I got at.
You know what I think also, too, Dawn, is the idea that when we tell stories of history, we have to remember that we are not perhaps of our gender, our race, our age, or whatever in those other lifetimes. That's very important to remember. When I go back to my past lives, 1857, I was walking down a certain street in New Orleans. I was a little black boy, and the cops were after me because I stole a loaf of bread. I was hungry. I distinctly remember that. I can hear it. I can walk down that street and see it.
Wow.
Early 1700s, I was walking along the levee in front of this specific plantation, 3 blocks from a house that I built a house on in the late 1977s. So I distinctly see, feel, sense, and know. The difference is that the energies of the past just want to be recognized, that they are a thread of the tapestry. They don't need us to make reparation. They don't need us to feel sorry for them. They don't need us to have penance. And seriously, we need to take this to heart. They do not need us to carry shame or guilt of their lives. That's so vitally important. Because when we do that, then we take on baggage of empty spirits, and then we become not a healthy spirit ourselves. So it's so very important to do that and recognize that. Once you do that and you recognize that, you say, I'm here, I feel your story, I can walk alongside of you and, listen. But sometimes people tend to jump into the past stories, and you'll see people go around and, like people that it's almost like they're reenacting a time in history with their clothes that they wear or their tattoos or their jobs or their professions or whatever, But that's pretty much jumping a spiritual time in a spirit, and that sometimes goes very much awry. So the idea is that once you start opening up and you hear all these stories, feel and sense things, you say, I hear you, I honor you, I understand, and thank you so much for walking along the journey with me, and then let them go. And once you can do that, just as with the quilt, once she found out the story and knew more about it, where it was, where it had been, it was thank you for the journey, thank you for walking along with me, and let it go and close the door, because the idea is that it can't overpower you in present day because we aren't in those other dimensions. Otherwise, we'll end up splitting our energy source. It'll be like putting a splitter when you plug in. Everything dims down, you know what I mean? And you don't want to do that. So we want to stay as light as we possibly can. So do you think in the Wandering Quilt, when she started to go find out about the story and asking the questions, everybody had different emotions. There was anger, there was frustration, there was excitement, there was neglect, there was love, there was this, that, or the other. But those were so vitally important emotions to be released, and that is the story of the Wandering Quilt. I almost think of, when I close my eyes, Dawn, and I think about the Wandering Quilt in the beginning, how she kept stitching and closing and kept opening, I'm going, what energy or something, there's emotions pent up in there from a bunch of people. It's almost as if it was a purse and people kept stuffing stuff in it, and it wanted to come out and they couldn't. And she and your character was starting to release it, perhaps?
Yeah, I absolutely can see that. And I love the idea that you picked up on, that she was open to being able to do that, despite the fear of, like, what the heck is going on with this quilt?
Right.
Never having seen something like that before, but leaving herself open to do that. And then once, like you said, it happened and she discovered what it was about, being able to absolutely release it, just now that we know, and didn't know it existed before, but now that I know, I'm okay.
So too, I think about quilts because my aunt, she used to make quilts, and I used to always go to her house in the 50s. And she would sit there with the women, and they had 2 of the wooden horses, and they would put the material across it, and all the quilts were done by hand, And I distinctly remember that, and I have, I think, 2 of her quilts here to this day. But, her entire kitchen and living room, there was material everywhere. She had pieces and threads and tons of machines and all kinds of different things. And it was just so exciting to go there because I would go behind her and pick up all the little pieces and make, doll dresses and stuff out of it. But the idea is that that's a remembrance for us to feel that love and that closeness. And how many stitches, go into a quilt. It kind of shocks me. I've been looking for another quilt for myself, and all I see are the ones that are made with machines. And I'm going, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. But then I thought back and I said, but I don't want anyone to make it with their hands because it would because it would impart too much of their energy into it, and me being the medium that I am, was looking for a clean piece. So I had bought a bunch of material recently. I said, I'm just going to sit here with my hands and just join these together. If it ever comes to something, it does or doesn't. So I think it's important to understand, where is your energy coming from when you are writing your books and your stories, when you are doing a quilt, when you are engaged with others. Do you think maybe, too, that's part of the Wandering Quilt series?
Oh, absolutely. 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 I am extremely, my quilts are all done by hand, and I am extremely aware when I am working on them of the transfer of whatever it is that I'm feeling. And I'm the same way in the garden. You know, I don't, and the kids knew when they was growing up, when they were growing up, you know, don't bring crap to mama in the garden. She doesn't want that in her food, you know, and I'm the same way with the quilt. I feel that, and I'm not quite so sure why I'm so committed to it, but I am, that transfer is real. And that when I write stories, it is my intention, which is, I think, the way it comes out there becomes really important. So, you know, the less baggage you can put on it, the better, which doesn't mean that you don't take from things that are in your head that you knew, because a lot of that is there, but it is about as clean as it could possibly get, because I don't want to transfer negative things to any reader I have. And when you put things out into the world, you just don't ever know where they're going to go. And the idea of them picking up some negative thing that happened to be going on with me, and I now know, especially writing fiction, that can happen, you know, because a lot of what you put in is based on what's happening around you at the time, even though your story is about a particular thing. And that, to me, that's like having a superpower that you have to be extremely careful about how you use. My life motto is, it's all about love, because I think in the end, that truly is what underlies everything else. And I want any meeting I have with people, any time I am dealing with them in any format, whether it's they're reading my work or they're meeting me in person, I want it to be a positive thing. I want them to leave better than they were when they came in to meet me. And I'm aware of that as I am doing this, even though I may be doing this as almost, it feels like I'm just being a channel, because I could not have told you when I sat down to write that story that is what that story would be. First of all, that it would be a story at all, and then that it would be what it was, and certainly not that a whole series came out. And I thought about this when you were talking about how we weren't the same thing in other lives, because the one that I just finished that I'm now editing is about the rise in anti-Asian hate. And there's a very beautiful, interesting quilt in that one. The quilt is at the center of all of the Quilt Journey Mystery Series stories. And, you know, I'm not Asian. The last one I did was about the Holocaust. I'm not Jewish, but and that had a wonderful quilt story to it, too. And I didn't start off with this theme that the quilts would do these things that they do, but as it turns out, they do. And when you said what you said, that's probably why I'm so open to it, because I didn't think about that as I was doing them, but they all do these things. And part of it is about energy that we carry that gets transmitted to someone who can do, as our protagonist does, just sort of figure out what's going on with that and how it impacts today and sort of straighten it out. But also the whole idea of what I carry even from my ancestors being a part of it, because the thing that a lot of them have in common is that somewhere along the way, people have been ill-treated, which I guess is totally at odds with my idea of it's all about love. It's like, where is the love in a Holocaust? You know, where is the love in enslavement? Where is the love in the rise in anti-Asian hate? And when I think about, and it's so true what I said about my ancestors just sort of being there with me. I remember there was a book called Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss, and it was the first time I ever thought about the idea of other lives. And my daughter, in his earlier editions, he used to have in the back people who practice past life regressions. And my daughter was totally intrigued with this idea, and she wanted to go. And he had a list of people all over the country. It was that few at the time that could that practice consistent with his view of how practice should go. And it was it wasn't past life regressions came as a part of his practice as a doctor, as a psychiatrist, but it was, once we frustrate everything else and we have not gotten any answers, let's go see if there's anything else here that we may need to look at that was not from this life. And so she wanted to go to the one that was closest to us. And we went, and she wanted me to go in with her, so I went in with her. And this guy's at the board. He's got a little, chalkboard in his office, and he's explaining to us how this works. And, it's like peeling back an onion, and you get to this layer, this core during past life regressions, if there's a need for it. So he's telling us this, but the whole time he's fanning his face, like something is flying in front of his face. And my daughter and I sort of looked at each other because we didn't see any flies or anything flying around. So finally, almost like in frustration, he stops and he turns to me and he says, "Can I tell you something?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "I don't know how to tell you this because I'm a man of science. I mean, that's what I do. I don't do anything else." And he said, "But I've never seen anything like this before, and I just need to tell you what's going on." He said, "You may have noticed me moving, getting something out of the way in my face." And we said, "Well, yeah, we did." And he said, "This room is filled with spirits who are trying to get me to tell you that they are rejoicing because you are here." I'm like,
yeah.
What? What am I supposed to do with that? Right. I said, "Okay. What does that mean?" And he said, "I cannot tell you what it means because I have never had anything like this before, and I feel just kind of weird telling you." He said, "The most I've ever done is I'm sort of an empath. I can sort of feel what's going on with you physically that might impact what it is that we're trying to do with you, mentally. But I've never seen anything." He said, "I don't see ghosts. I don't hear ghosts. I don't understand where we are right now."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, well, I'll take it for what it's worth, but okay." And he said, "I just have to tell you that you have such a powerful presence that just a moment with you would do more than 6 months of somebody coming to me for therapy." And I'm like, "What? What are you saying?" And he said, "I'm just telling you." He said, "That much I do know." And when I think about my ancestors, the thought that they could have been operating through somebody who could bring that to me was just unbelievable. I mean, although I did believe it, it made for me the things that you're saying about how this shows up in our life and the kind of energy that we give and what we, how important our intention is that we do it with. It just makes it real. And when I went to write these books, I did not have any intention. There was no commercial intention at all. In fact, I made remember, I've been publishing textbooks for the past 30-something years. I made the very, very intentional decision that I would not do it commercially. I would not go through a publisher. I self-published it. Well, assisted self-publishing through our universe. Because I knew, and now I understand even more why I was supposed to do that. I knew that this was something that was so new and different that I didn't want it to go through the filter of somebody who could not understand that. Right. I knew it needed to be out there, and I was willing to put my own money behind it because to me what was important, it didn't matter if I ever got that money back. What was important was that people hear what it was that those books had to offer them. And now, because of you, I'm thinking it wasn't even what I thought it was. I mean, that's a piece of it, but it's got something even bigger going on here that is so incredibly in tune with my concept of it's all about love. Because, and even how I approach the book, I don't just deal with it as a classic cozy mystery, which is a whole genre, sort of think Murder, She Wrote, where you've got somebody who is constantly having these situations that they're presented with. It reads like that. It's very comfortable. It's very cozy. There's no blood and guts and police chases and all that sort of thing in it. But there's a much bigger agenda, and it kept coming back to love. So the relationship between the family members, the relationship between the husband and wife, which develops even more over the books that are coming next, is really a way. It was almost like sort of putting that out there for people to be able to see, almost like modeling behavior, thinking we can be kinder to each other, we can be nicer to each other, and there's no drawback to that. It doesn't mean that we are soft or weak. We can love each other in ways that we would all benefit from, all of us, if we just allowed ourselves to do that. And to me, putting that together with the stories that the quilts were about was really an important piece, although I could see an editor saying, look, you need to decide whether you want this to be a love story about these people or you want this to be about, what happens on the energy level, or you want to deal with the DEI issues. And I was like, no, it's got to be all of it, because it all comes together. It's all real for me. I mean, a lot of that is how I go through life. And when I think about when I was considering, how I wanted to get it out there, I realized they just weren't ready for it. And it may well be, Dr. Jeanette, why the first experience I had in the book that is now the #1 employment law textbook in the country was what it was, because it had been rejected. I had been teaching this subject matter, which I was asked to create, employment law in colleges of business, for 12 years. I had created a course. Other people had picked up, and it started to be taught other places, but not nearly as much as it should be. And the publishers all said, when I finally wrote the book, there's no market for this. Like, you're one of the only people in the country that teaches this stuff. And I kept saying, but believe me, if you write a book, there'll be more people, because they'll know how to do this. They wouldn't hear it. And then the Hill Thomas hearings hit that Saturday in the autumn of like 93 or so. And that was on a Saturday. By Monday, I had competing offers on my desk saying, please write this book, make it have a really big chapter on sexual harassment. And that the decision to go with the company we went with was based on the fact that they said, look, the way this works is you sell enough the first edition and we'll go to a second edition. Well, we understand that this is at the beginning, that you're not going to have a big audience for this because it's not out there yet. So we're willing to go to the second edition, even if you don't do well with the first. We just don't have a whole lot of hopes for it, but we just believe this is a really important subject matter. We now see that because of what happened with the Hill Thomas hearings, and they understood what happened in the workplace mattered. So they did it, and within the first edition, the book won some sort of award for outstripping all projections for what the sales would be. It became #1 and has been #1. It's now going into the 11th edition. It has been #1 the entire time they have been out there. I mean, #1 in the sense that I would see book reps at my national meeting, the American Association of Colleges, or the Academy of Legal Studies and Business, and they would see my name tag and they would go, "Oh, it's you." And I was like, I don't even know you. What kind of greeting is that? And they say, well, you wrote that book, and nobody is willing to change that book. I mean, they don't want to hear that we have one as well. And so it has outstripped all the competition. There are courses now all over the world. It is still #1. But the thing that sticks out to me, that was the one about this, is the world not being ready for it. And if I had not written that book the way it was, because it didn't need to be like a traditional textbook, it needed to have more heart in it, because these are heart issues. And it resonated with people. And I think that when I got ready to decide about publishing this one, it was like, I'm going to trust what happened before. I'm going to trust that it's new, it's different, nobody's ever seen anything like that, and it will be able to stand on its own, but people who are used to the traditional thing will not allow it to do that. So do not go that route. Do not let a publisher take this and do what they want to it in order to sell it, because in order to sell it was not what I was interested in.
You know, I think also, too, Dawn, in closing, when we talk about the word love, and I've spoken about this so many times, is that people have a very kind of misconstrued idea about it. That's why there's so many different forms of love. However, when you talk with spirit and what they're really seeking in their story is called unconditional love. Unconditional love means even if I killed someone in my past life, if I have some really dangerous stuff going on in my life, even if there's something very harsh in the way I lived my life or the history that was going on at the time with society or the people, we could still feel all of their emotions of what they're going through. However, when you had said the question of how did they get through that, they got through it with unconditional love. And that means that they did in service what was going on at that time, but there was an underlying current that kept them all banded together. In other words, if you're out and you're, in the military and you're on the battlefield and you're all doing a certain thing, but still when you came back at nighttime, you would share a cigarette, you would share a piece of bread, because you had unconditional love, which meant that there was no words, nothing was necessary. It was just a sense that everybody had deep inside them. So I think that's what spirits are really looking for right now, is for humans to say, I hear your story. I can understand the time in which you grew up or the time in which you were living or working, and I can now understand that unconditional love is the answer. It's not regular love. Regular love has too many emotions and feelings tied up in it. Unconditional love brings us to the core where we can say we are all one, and that's the goal we are seeking.
Yes, yes. Oh my God. I am so glad you are in the world. Oh, my gosh. I am so glad you are in the world. We need that voice. We need that voice.
Yeah. Well, see, we all channel. And you and I couldn't tell you two words that I just said, but I know it's all channel. And we know that we're here for a reason. We know we're here to share this and touch this and be able to share this with others. How many times, you and I are both older, do we see people, I work with end-of-life patients, they're just very desperate. And they're like, I'm not going to die because God's going to be mad at me and I don't know what's over there for me. Or I had another patient, she says, I'm not ready to die. I have too many bills. I can't leave my spouse here. And I said to her, honey, you don't have bills in heaven. Just go. You let yourself go, Or, the idea that, if I go, if something happens to me, the whole idea, they left us too early. That's a human story. If a spirit came here and they had a certain time limit, they did their mission, they can choose to go. It has nothing to do with good, I didn't get them to do ... That's our issue. That has nothing to do with the other spirit. And I think that's so if we start to get into unconditional love, we could say, I honor your story, I walked with your journey, I thank you, and I now release you. And if we can really have that mantra in our life, it will definitely start to open up to more, as I hope your other books do too, Dawn, yes?
Yep, I do. And it's just amazing to me what you've said and how it is reflected in the books. You remember those repeating pattern pictures they used to have a few years ago? That's what talking to you has been like. It was nothing changed. The picture didn't change, but you let me see something that was so different. It was all right there in front of my face, and I never tuned in to it that way.
It goes right along with the idea of stop and smell the roses. People are walking down the street and they can't even smell them because they don't even notice that they're there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or even with your food, people will say, I'll say to them, what'd you have for dinner? And they'll give me this recipe name. And they'll ask me, what did you have for dinner? And I'll say, I had a tomato, an egg, a cucumber, and an orange. And they're like, I don't want to know what's on your counter. What did you eat for dinner? I said, that's what I ate for dinner. Do you know what I mean? So, in other words, I had touched and felt all the energy rather than conglomerated into something else.
That was something they didn't even remember good,
Right.
But you remember your tomato, your egg.
Right.
Oh, that's wild. I love it.
So I think in closing, Dawn, we can say that truly your series is about how to open up to energy, sense and feel it, but not to have fear about it. And that's what you really wanted to project is there's no fear in this, right?
There is no fear in this. There is no fear. There's only love and understanding.
Well, Dawn, can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
Yes. My website is quiltedhearts.com, or I'm sorry, quiltedhearts.world, which should have told me something. I didn't even know that existed, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, maybe this is going to be bigger than I thought it was going to be, but it's quiltedhearts.world. And I also have practicaldiversity.com, which is one where I do a lot of my diversity work that has, quilts and all of that stuff in it. Mm-hmm. So both of those people can reach me through.
Very good. Well, Dawn, it was a pleasure to have you with us today to open up and inspire others and to help guide them along the way with our thoughts and our stories. So I thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
If you'd like to find out more information about Dawn Bennett-Alexander, again, the Quilt Journeys Mystery Series. Today we spoke about the Wandering Quilt book. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to her websites for more information. And it is about saying, what am I feeling? What am I sensing? I really want so much more than just this human journey. And we are all ready for it. It's just really about stopping and listening, about opening your eyes and feeling things around you. And that's when you start to have the conversations with those around you, your tribe, your family, your friends, and say, let's do something different. Let's see something different and let's go on a different adventure. Start with one of these books and you'll go on a different adventure for our Summer Read 2023. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr.jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.